So yeah, I'm Jim Jones. I think everybody here in the room knows me, but for people at home, I'm a product infrastructure architect for 1111 Systems. But as many of you may or may not know, I tend to think about backup and disaster recovery far, far, far too much. And so today I'm hoping to ignite your thoughts, if you will, about object storage and how it in the modern world plays into disaster recovery. So all good stories start with the why. So here's the why. So if you haven't looked at disaster recovery in the past 10 years or so, it's no longer fire and flood and blood, which is what's driving the why we do backup, why we do replication and things like that. It's all ransomware. The attacks are coming everywhere. They grow by about 30% every single year, and it's a global issue. And frankly, the attacks and the methodologies are constantly changing. I will say that I put this picture on this slide for one very important reason, to share my favorite time sink of life, which is the ransomware.live website that's run by a friend of mine, Julian Meskelton. Do check it out if you ever care anything about ransomware. But yeah, while over half of it's in the United States, we do see this as a global issue, and it's impactful to you and your business. So because we're solving for ransomware, we have to think in our DR strategies about things that we never had to think about before. It used to be, well, if I had a copy here and then I had a copy somewhere else, then I'm pretty good, and preferably one with some replicas in there. Well, today, the first thing we have to make sure is we have everything encrypted, because the first thing that happens in a modern ransomware attack is they try to exfiltrate your data, preferably by backup, because it's a nice big pretty bundle. Okay. And then after they exfiltrate your data, the next step is to try to delete the backups and the replicas so that you can't get back without paying it. And then finally, if we got past all of that gauntlet, the last thing in our DR strategy we have to think about today is, how complex is that service restore going to be? You know, we're here at Edge Field Day. We're talking about edge things. And while it's practical, we've got all these things now more distributed than we ever have before. It's not just in one data center. We have to think about, how do we make that information resilient? How do we make those workloads, which, you know, may or may not be stateful, be able to come back and be able to work in a timely manner? And so where I like to start with that is thinking about resilience in a layered approach. Okay, it's not backup is the savior for all the things that you do. Security is a savior for all that you do. Connectivity is a savior for all that you do. You have to think about all of it. Okay, and usually you're going to need, if you're doing this at any kind of scale, at least somebody external to your organization thinking about it as well. So you have to start with monitoring an active defense of your actual production sources. You know, an AV just isn't going to cut it now. We have to get into the XDRs of the world. We have to get into the system logging, the active threat defense, things along those lines, and make sure that those also play well with whoever our backup vendor is. Okay, all of them are now talking in securities language now, and you can inform back and forth between disaster recovery systems and your active security system. Next, we want to look at getting help for that well-architected recovery strategy or data protection strategy. Okay, I can't tell you how many times over the years it's like, oh, somebody went and spun up an entire app or a couple of VMs. Nobody told the other people, and now I've got this app that's been running 6 months without any protection on it whatsoever. So you have to have systems that inform that, and preferably automation that makes it just happen, so that you don't get surprised. Then for everything, we want to wrap everything with encrypted offsite backups, okay, that are preferably immutable. Okay, so these backups can't go away. So if they're nuking your own premises backups, they can't get rid of those. And then we get into replication to get the quick workloads up, and then we do validated recovery. So, you know, an untested backup is nothing but bulk data that's doing you no good. So you have to test regularly. All right, so object storage, that's what I said was my premise here. So for years, it's always been, we did tape was the first thing that we did. We did disk, a Windows disk for storage and all those things. In the modern world, everybody and every backup vendor that you talk to is going to tell you that object storage is the way and the light. First of all, it natively supports immutability, and it's a abstracted system because it's effectively, I like to refer to as object storage as a database system that identifies as a storage system. You get an abstraction from the system to the underlying hardware that is distributed by nature. Also, it scales. As we think about disaster recovery and stuff like that, you know, a couple VMs is one thing, but what happens when they say, well, I want to protect that NetApp filer that's sitting in the corner that's 3 petabytes, okay? You have to think about these things, and doing all of this on-prem is not always the answer. With object storage, just by the nature of how the hyperscaler variants of it are designed, we get exceptional durability. You know, there's never really one copy of your data, even in that single copy. Amazon S3, for example, you know, every block that you ever write to S3, as long as you're not using one of the one zone classes, is eventually written 3 times in a given region. And then finally comes down to cost. You know, everybody loves backup, everybody loves DR, everybody wants to say we've got the best recovery scenario ever, but they don't ever really want to pay for it. So, we lost a signal. There we go, and we're back. Cool. And so, you know, anything we can do for cost gets important. I will say that with backup workloads, we can get into those secondary classes better because very much so it is a lots of writes and very few reads. So as we think about things like infrequent access for S3 or the cold tier with Azure, it's a very good use case for that, as long as you can cover off the API fee portion of it. And that's where it gets a little weird, but it's great. All right, so why and now how are we going to use it? Okay, so object storage comes in many flavors. You know, just as well as I can say I've got Amazon S3 here, or I've got Wasabi, or I've got whatever service that you want in the cloud, I can just as much say I've got Pure Storage, I've got Object First, or I've got Scality on premises. Okay, so we now are into a world where we can either natively with our backup vendors or through partnerships leverage object storage at scale on premises, the same way we would think about a storage array before. We just add more bricks and just keep growing the system. We can use that for our first hit backups. Never ever for your like production, like it's got to compute something workloads, send those directly to the cloud, because your restore scenarios become very, very ugly. Okay, so your VM backups, your physical machine backups, and your databases send to something on-prem. And then cloud is where we're going to do that backup copy. This is where we're going to get that off-site. We're here talking about Edge today. I find it fun and humorous that this said Robo up until about an hour ago, but Edge, Robo, we're evolving the terms. So Edge is a great use case for going direct to the cloud. File shares, our public cloud workloads, we can go hybrid cloud, send those from cloud to cloud fairly easily. And then SaaS applications. So what does this actually look like? So full disclosure, I am using Veeam as like my test bed for how I show how this worked, but I will tell you, as someone who deals with a lot of these vendors, it's a very agnostic concept. So what you see here can work other ways. We can take our DR system like configuration and send that to an object storage bucket that's immutable and encrypted offsite. So as we have to stand up, let's say they've actually managed to attack ESX, and Windows and everything on-prem, I can actually restore that backup system with all of its configuration into the cloud or to another location. We send our backups to a local repository, copy them to backup copy, and do long-term governance-based archiving for those type of workloads. And that NAS filer that we talked about, we don't want to back up a 3 petabyte filer to another 3 petabyte filer. Let's just send it all directly to object storage. For Edge, you know, yesterday we heard from the fine folks at Avasa as well as VMware Edge Cloud Orchestrator. And the thought that kept going through my head as they talked is, well, nobody's trying to cover off how I'm going to protect the stateful things that stand up that they aren't anticipating. So this can be solved for. We can do agent-based backups. Avasa just runs on a Linux-based system, so we can protect Avasa itself by protecting the underlying operating system. And this can be built into your deployment workflows as you're standing that up. deploying agents for at least Veeam and Cohesity, because I've done this myself. You can do it via infrastructure as code and be up and running. And you can do that across both. You can also do it for the virtual machines that you may have in Edge Cloud. And then you can manage that with the disaster recovery service providers overlay. Okay, so they'll have a management overlay that lets you have global watch of what those backup workloads look like, and that you've got a centralized deployment, which is pretty handy. So, but in all of those cases, we can send them into object storage buckets. The beauty of the scalability of the solution is, if I am a global organization, and what I think about in Edge usually is I like to think of Dollar General. Okay, and they've got thousands of locations all over the world. I can be regional with my backups. I can be store-based with my backups, and silo those disaster recovery plans based on that. But again, a backup is only good if we can do something with it. So if we look at the big holistic picture of what recovery looks like, I got to take care of everything. I've got my data center workloads, I've got my edge workloads, I've got my file-based storage workloads. And in some situations, it's absolutely going to be great that I'm going to restore those things back on-prem. But that may not be the option. Fire, flood, and blood still happens. I hear fire trucks all the time at home. Okay, so we also have to care for what happens if going back on-prem is not an answer. And what's nice is hyperscaler cloud is very rapidly becoming that answer to what do I do versus having my own secondary data center. Okay, that was the thing that I lived that life for far too long, and I never quite was sure that I could run everything. With hyperscaler cloud, I've always got enough capacity pretty much to do anything that I need to do. And even though it may be expensive for a short period of time, I've got the ability to take my things and take my workloads and recover them directly from that object storage into that cloud. So for example, that configuration backup, I can build a virtual machine instance in AWS, restore my configuration to it, because all of my backups were, say, going to Amazon S3, they'll automatically link back in, and I'll already have inventory available to me. I can take those databases and I can recover them either back as virtual machines, or I can recover them directly to Amazon RDS. All of my VMs, or let's say I've got an edge situation, that I've got a location that I've got to get up and I've got enough connectivity that I can deal with it, I can potentially recover that edge workload directly in as an instance, because the backup format is portable. It doesn't, if physical can go to virtual, virtual can go to physical, we're good to go. And then finally, those file shares I can take either into an instance, or I can take it into FSX or object storage itself. And so with that, that is all I've got for you today. And I'd just like to say thank you.